It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I am Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global, bringing you the day's big stories from across India and the world. My colleague Caroline Malone is joining me from Washington, D.C. Caroline, good to have you with us.
Well, good morning, Tanvi. It's 9 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we cover Ukraine's bid to become part of the EU. But first, here are the headlines.
COP28 summit ends with a historic deal on transition away from fossil fuels. Tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency picks momentum. After the United Nations General Assembly votes overwhelmingly to demand ceasefire in Gaza, Israel's foreign minister says agreeing to a ceasefire at this stage would be a mistake and they will continue to fight Hamas with or without international support. Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives set to vote on formalizing impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden, with floor vote expected on Wednesday. And after meeting U.S. President Joe Biden in Washington, Ukraine's Zelensky gets $273 million worth aid from Oslo in its war with Russia ahead of a key EU summit starting tomorrow.
Last night, Russia launched
It won't be an easy summit, which will start on December 14. We are very content that 99% of member countries fully support Ukraine and that they are ready to start talks on future Ukraine's EU membership. It is blocked by Hungary. It is a fact.
First news from the crisis in West Asia. Israel's foreign minister said on Wednesday that agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza at this stage would be a mistake. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen reiterated that the country will continue its war against Hamas, whether or not it has international support. Cohen also requested the international community to act effectively and aggressively to protect global shipping lanes. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan plans to travel to Israel on Thursday to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Sullivan has also planned meetings with Israeli War Cabinet and President Herzog to discuss the latest developments. The trip comes amid open tensions between U.S. President Joe Biden and Netanyahu over the Israeli military operations in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli army claimed that tens of its soldiers were killed while fighting in Gaza on Wednesday. The casualties include a colonel who led a regiment. Over 114 Israeli soldiers have been killed since Gaza ground operations began on 20th of October. The Israeli army on Wednesday also released footage, and this footage showed ground and aerial offensives in Gaza. Body camera videos showed what was said to be Israeli troops engaged in operations on the ground. Earlier, the 193-member United Nations General Assembly voted on a draft resolution that demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict, as well as the unconditional release of all hostages. India voted in favor of this draft resolution in the UNGA. The resolution was adopted with 153 votes in favor, 23 nations in abstinence, and 10 votes against the text. The UNGA adopted the draft resolution introduced by Egypt at an emergency special session on Tuesday.
Civilians must be protected, consistent with the international humanitarian law. In addition, we support the release of all hostages immediately and unconditionally.
India, which voted in favor of the resolution, said that international humanitarian law must be observed in all circumstances.
Our challenge in this extraordinarily difficult time is to strike the right balance. the gravity and complexity of what the international community faces is underlined by the Secretary General invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. We therefore welcome the fact that the international community has been able to find a common ground to address the multiple challenges facing the region right now.
And giving us more on the story is DD India's Sarah Coates, who has sent us this report from Tel Aviv.
Hi there, Tanvi. Well, look, a furious reaction from Israel's UN representative Gilad Erdan. After that vote, he turned to members and said, "You want a real ceasefire." He then held up a sign which read, "For a ceasefire deal," and then there's a phone number. Now, that phone number appears to be a phone number for the head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Yahya Sinwar, and he is the man that is believed to be the mastermind behind these October 7 attacks down in southern Israel. But look, in terms of the reaction here on the ground in Israel, it's not really being spoken about too widely today. What people believe here is that this ground operation should continue for as long as it takes for the military to dismantle Hamas, saying that the status quo must change and that atrocities like October 7 must never happen again. So that's the general reaction, Tanvi, here on the ground. Not really too much, as people really expected this. And of course, that was a non-binding vote.
On to the United States now. The House of Representatives is expected to vote on Wednesday to legitimize the impeachment inquiry of Democratic President Joe Biden. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline, major showdown expected at this impeachment inquiry floorboard?
Well, that's right, Tanvi. The US House of Representatives is set to vote on formalising the impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. House Republicans allege improper profiting by the Biden family during Joe Biden's time as vice president. The White House denies wrongdoing, dismissing the probe as politically motivated ahead of the 2024 US election. Republicans aim to vote on the matter before a 3-week holiday break starting from Thursday. Ahead of a key European leaders summit later this week, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen said that joining the bloc would be Ukraine's ultimate victory. Von der Leyen also called on the EU to continue supporting Ukraine in its conflict against Russia. The EU Commission had proposed starting membership talks with Ukraine once it meets several conditions.
As the war drags on, we must prove what it means to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Ukraine is not only fighting against the invader, but for Europe. And joining our family will be Ukraine's ultimate victory. And for this, we have a decisive role to play. Staff of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made an unanticipated visit to Norway on Wednesday. Zelensky engaged in discussions with Norway's Prime Minister and other Nordic leaders regarding increased support for Kyiv in its conflict with Russia. Zelensky underscored the anticipated challenges at this week's European Union summit, but affirmed Kyiv's fulfillment of all prerequisites for membership.
It won't be an easy meeting, it won't be an easy summit, which will start on December 14th. We are very content that 99% of member countries fully support Ukraine and that they are ready to start talks on future Ukraine's EU membership. It is blocked by Hungary, it is a fact. From our side, we are very constructive. We did absolutely everything. We carried out all recommendations by the European Commission, all recommendations by our partners.
It's a fact.
Meanwhile, Norway's Prime Minister has announced his country's commitment to donating $2.74 million to Ukraine, constituting a portion of the previously sanctioned $6.85 billion over a 5-year period by Norway's parliament.
President Zelensky and his government needs to pay nurses, doctors, teachers, and run his administration. We are now able, as part of our Nansen package, to make a pledge of $1 billion in 2023. We are about to leave that year now. And then we are also increasing our financial and humanitarian support to around $800 million this year.
Well, the Ukrainian President Zelensky has also said that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has no reason to block Ukraine's EU membership. Hungary has consistently threatened to veto Ukraine's EU membership bid, with Prime Minister Viktor Orban accusing Ukraine of denying the rights of tens of thousands of ethnic Hungarians living in the country.
The government's stance at present is that Ukraine's fast admission to the European Union would have unpredictable consequences. Ukraine's fast lane accession does not serve the interests of either Hungary or the European Union.
Well, for more, DD India's Alex Cadier sent us this report from Brussels.
The European Union's support for Ukraine is about to face one of its biggest tests. The bloc's 27 heads of state will meet here on Thursday, hoping to sign off on more than $50 billion of aid for Ukraine and opening the long-awaited membership talks for that country. But one man stands in their way. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has said that Ukraine is not ready to join the EU, that the country is too corrupt, and that its vast agricultural industry could threaten European farmers. Ukraine's foreign minister in Brussels earlier this week said joining the EU is existential for his country.
I cannot imagine, I don't even want to talk about the devastating consequences that will occur shall the Council fail to make this decision.
Several European leaders have tried and failed to negotiate with Viktor Orban, including Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and French President Emmanuel Macron, who invited Mr. Orban for a dinner at the Élysée Palace in Paris. One thing that may make Budapest budge is money. On Wednesday, the European Commission released more than $10 billion in EU funds for Hungary that it had frozen over a year ago. A total of €23 billion had been withheld by Brussels over rule of law and democratic backsliding concerns. Hungary now says it would be willing to lift its veto if the rest of the money is released too. So for now, the Commission, Hungary and the Member States are at loggerheads, with EU leaders arriving in Brussels on Thursday for a historic summit, hoping to break the deadlock. Alex Cadier in Brussels reporting for DD India.
In yet another attack on Ukraine, Russia fired 10 ballistic missiles at Kyiv during the early hours of Wednesday. The attack left 53 people injured, including 6 children, devastated homes and extensively damaged a children's hospital. 18 people have been hospitalized due to the injuries caused by falling debris. This was Russia's second missile assault on Kyiv this week. In retaliation, Ukrainian soldiers are using drones to try and pin down Russian forces near the Bakhmut region. Drones deter the Russian military from further advancing into Ukrainian territories. Russia captured Bakhmut in May 2023. Poland's president on Wednesday swore in Donald Tusk as the country's new prime minister, ending a right-wing populist regime. Well, Tusk, who already served as premier in the past, has set a pro-European Union vision for Poland and pledged strong support for Ukraine. He's also expected to travel to Brussels on Thursday to participate in the bloc summit with fellow EU leaders. British Home Secretary James Cleverly has suggested the government is open to revisiting the wording of a controversial bill that would see asylum seekers sent to Rwanda. The bill passed its first vote in Parliament on Tuesday, aiming to circumvent concerns that led the Supreme Court to declare the policy illegal. DD India's Julia Chapman reports from London.
Despite concerns from different sides of the ruling Conservative Party, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was able to get his new Rwanda bill passed the first hurdle, but the second will prove more challenging. The bill provides legal backing for ministers to ignore injunctions from the European Court of Human Rights. But in its current form, it does allow individual asylum seekers to challenge their deportations to Rwanda. Right-wing Conservative MPs don't think it's tough enough and want to see the language strengthened. 29 of them abstained from Tuesday night's vote, defying an order that they vote with the government. More moderate voices in the party who did vote for the bill did so on the basis that the wording does not change. On Wednesday, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, the country's Interior Minister, said he will speak to critics and work to better understand their thinking on this bill. But he rejected the idea that the bill should be struck down altogether rather than amended. Another vote will be held in January. Until then, Rishi Sunak faces a challenging few weeks as he tries to bridge the diverse factions of his party. Julia Chapman in London, reporting for DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you, Caroline. Caroline Malone joining us from Washington, D.C. COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber hailed a climate deal approved by almost 200 countries on Wednesday as a historic package of measures which offered a robust plan to keep the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming within reach.
The COP28 Climate Summit approved a deal that would for the first time push nations to transition away from fossil fuels to avert the worst effects of climate change on Wednesday. Representatives from nearly 200 countries agreed to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels to avert the worst impacts of climate change in Dubai. The COP28 presidency released a proposed text of a final climate draft that calls on nations to shift away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, systematic and fair manner to achieve the net zero goals by 2050. To combat climate change, 5 key measures have been outlined. A just transition away from fossil fuels by 2050, prioritizing zero and low emission technologies like renewables and nuclear, phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and accelerating the phase down of coal power and rapidly deploying clean transportation solutions. These actions aim to significantly reduce emissions across energy systems and transportation, paving the way for a sustainable future. They also aim to align with the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement and urgently address the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels to mitigate climate change.
We might well be on the verge of something that is truly consequential, but we are there to find out.
There are things that we like, things that we do not like so much, but we identify things coming from everybody and a clear message on strong commitment towards 1.5 orientating, providing the grounds for keep on going.
This is what we need. This is what the world needs. Not only does the text say that, it also says what to put instead, which is renewable energy, so a tripling of renewable energy.
The proposal underscores the critical role of multilateralism and international cooperation in addressing global challenges, particularly in the context of the Paris Agreement's implementation. While acknowledging progress in mitigation, adaptation and means of implementation and support, it highlights that parties collectively are not on track to achieve the Paris Agreement's long-term goals. Gautam Roy, DD India.
You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. A major security breach witnessed in India's parliament on the 22nd anniversary of a deadly attack on the complex. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Next news from India. In what is being described as a major security breach in India's parliament, on day 8 of the winter session here, 2 visitors jumped into the chambers of the lower house or Lok Sabha from the gallery and reportedly hurled gas-emitting objects. Later, they were detained by the police. Speaker Om Birla told members that investigations had found that the smoke released inside the parliament was ordinary smoke just to cause chaos.
जो घटना शून्यकाल के समय घटित हुई थी, उस घटना की लोकसभा अपने स्तर पर संपूर्ण जांच कर रही है और इस संबंध में दिल्ली पुलिस को भी आवश्यक निर्देश दे दिए गए हैं। लेकिन जो हम सबकी चिंता थी कि वह धुआं क्या था, वह अभी तक प्रारंभिक जांच में जो जांच की उसमें वह साधारण धुआं और सनसनी फैलने वाला धुआं था, इसलिए उस धुएं की कोई ऐसी चिंता का विषय नहीं, उसकी प्रारंभिक ठीक से जांच कर ली गई है। प्रारंभिक जांच के अंदर जो प्रारंभिक जांच आए वो दोनों लोग पकड़ लिए गए हैं, उनकी सारी सामग्री को जब्त कर लिया गया है और जो 2 लोग बाहर थे उनको भी गिरफ्तार कर लिया गया है।
Trinamool Congress leader, TMC leader Mahua Moitra on Wednesday sought an urgent hearing from the Supreme Court days after she filed a petition challenging her expulsion from the Indian lower house of parliament, claiming there was substantial illegality and arbitrariness in the conduct of the Parliament Ethics Committee. The Trinamool Congress leader had approached the Supreme Court after the lower house adopted the Ethics Committee report that held her guilty of accepting gifts from a businessman to further his interests. More from New Delhi. The Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence GPAI Summit has entered its second day in India's national capital. Today, a global AI, Artificial Intelligence Expo, showcasing AI solutions in diverse areas is being held as part of this summit. DD India's Shubhendu Ghosh reports.
We are at the Global AI Expo in Bharat Mandapam. As part of the GPAI Summit, leading AI enterprises, startups from India and the world are showcasing their work at this expo. All around us, we see very interesting artificial intelligence solutions in diverse areas, from agriculture to space, from health to financial services. India is hosting the GPAI Summit this year. The agenda concerns with responsible AI, data governance, the manner in which commercial use of AI could be put together. Also, the future of work. How is AI going to shape work in the coming future? With all these artificial intelligence AI experts from diverse fields congregating here, it is expected that the deliberation will yield a certain global framework for this cutting-edge technology in the times to come. With camera person Sumit Dhiman, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in Delhi.
Further east in India, the 47th International Kolkata Book Fair has proudly announced the United Kingdom as its theme country for 2024 in collaboration with the British Council and the Publishers and Booksellers Guild. Commemorating the 75th anniversary of the British Council in India, the UK Pavilion at the Central Park Mela Ground will immerse visitors in the diverse tapestry of British education, science and cultural heritage. The Future of English exhibition promises an engaging exploration of the language's global impact, making this literary celebration a must-attend for cultural exchange and intellectual discussions.
The UK is delighted to be the theme country for the 4th time at the Calcutta Book Fair. We thank the Publishers Guild for supporting the UK so that we can bring the best of the UK to India. Calcutta is an amazing city. I'm very lucky to have visited many times over my time here in India, and we're really looking forward to celebrating literature, arts and education through the Calcutta Book Fair and bringing some of the best names in the UK literature.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. So Argentinians are struggling to survive as the country's annual inflation rate is close to 150%. The poverty rate is also at an alarming 40% and growing. Newly elected President Javier Milei has said that things will get worse before they get better. Gasoline in Cuba, which is already one of the world's best bargains, is getting cheaper by the day for those who have access to dollar as the local peso currency continues its fall. The peso began a sharp decline in 2021 and has been in fall since. The Indian economy grew by 7.6% year-on-year in real terms in the July-September quarter of the fiscal year 2024, surpassing projections by all domestic and international agencies. This follows the 7.8% expansion registered in the first quarter. The fact that this has been achieved amid a weak and uncertain global backdrop shows the resilience of the Indian economy. So the Indian economy grew at 7.8 and 7.6% respectively. India's manufacturing sector was at 9-quarter high of 13.9%. While utilities expanded by 10.1%, the construction sector grew at a strong 13.3%. Purchasing Manufacturers Index, PMI, for both manufacturing and services was strongly expansionary. India's 8 core sectors also posted a growth of 12.1%. Economic activities have increased, as evident by around 70.5 million tons of cargo being handled in the month of October this year. Buoyant economic activity was also evident in the robust GST collections, that's goods and services tax, which averaged 1.7 lakh crores. All this is being attained without any pressure on macro stability. Further, an opinion piece on the Indian economy in a newspaper, How Indian Economy Has Silenced Perennial Pessimists, has bashed NRI, that's non-resident Indian economists, with their Western-tinted glasses. The opinion piece criticizes NRI economists, saying the moment Indian economy picks up pace, they turn into forensic auditors, scrutinizing GDP calculation methods with the intensity of detective and murder mystery. This opinion piece goes on to say that these NRI economists choose to accept when Indian numbers are down, but brush them aside as incorrect when Indian numbers go up. The author says, like a Bollywood underdog, the Indian economy surprised everyone with a 7.6% growth rate for the July-September quarter, higher than the Reserve Bank of India's estimates. The author also says this robust growth rate is like a reality check for the doom and gloom brigade. The author points out that the analysis of the November data is objective, since it showed strong manufacturing growth, but also showed sluggish agriculture and services growth. The opinion piece also said that the construction sector, however, echoed the manufacturing sector's robust performance with a substantial 13.3% growth, a significant leap from the 5.7% seen in the second quarter of the fiscal year 2023. So that was the data on the resilient Indian economy. And now, as we wind up this edition of DD India Global, let's take you to Beijing in China, where a giant panda was seen rolling around in snow playfully in the Beijing Zoo after the Chinese capital received the first snowfall of winter. On Wednesday, a second cold wave drifted into the city, causing temperatures to drop significantly. So with that, it's a wrap in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja. From my entire team in New Delhi, thank you for watching. Namaskar.